Hello there. Today I wanted to look at a classic Austrian wine. So this is Weingut Brundlmayer Ried Kammerner Lamm Gruner Veltliner. It's a 2018 vintage, and vineyard, often abbreviated simply to Ried Lamm, is an Erste from the Kamptal region. Brundlmayer are one of the leading producers in the Kamptal region and arguably one of the leading producers in Austria. Their 80-hectare estate is based in Langenlois, here about 70 kilometres northeast of Vienna. This is the confluence of the Danube and its tributary, the Kamp River. The estate gives its date of establishment as 1581, and today it's overseen by Willy Brundlmayer, who took it over in 1980. And during Willy's period of tenure, the estate has converted to being organic. Its practices are all completely sustainable, and it practices a very eco-friendly approach to viticulture. The estate has a whole slew of Erste, some of the top vineyards in the region, two of which very famously neighbour each other, the Ried Lamm and Ried Heiligenstein. And the way that these two neighbouring vineyards are cultivated really typifies the approach of vignerons working in the wine regions of the Danube, and their approach to two varieties, Riesling and Grüner Veltliner. It tends to be that Riesling vines are grown on the better drained, steeper, lighter soils at higher altitudes where it's that little bit cooler, while Grüner Veltliner is grown in slightly lower lying vineyards, perhaps vineyards that are a little flatter, may have heavier soils, and often are warmer locations. So the two varieties complement each other very well in the steep terrain that makes up the wine regions of the Danube. And this vineyard, Ried Lamm particularly, is one of the warmest sites in this region. Ried Lamm is a 40-hectare vineyard with multiple owners, so you'll see wines from Ried Lamm being made by other top producers in the area. The vineyard is just 4% and it faces due south. The soils comprise mostly calcareous loams, although in the higher portions at the eastern end of the vineyard, some of the underlying siltstone and sandstone of the what's referred to as the Zöbinger formation, which underlies the neighbouring Heiligenstein vineyard, protrude and come quite close to the surface. By contrast, this rock is quite low in lime content. 2018 started with a warm January, with normal cold temperatures returning in February and March. In springtime, it seemed as if summer had already arrived. There was hot weather, and this resulted in quite a lot of rain in May. However, plentiful sunshine resulted in excellent and even flowering. June was dry, but then there were a few storms in July. The season, however, was very advanced, meaning that sparkling base wines could be picked in some of the earliest harvests they'd ever done in August. There were some scares about rain affecting harvest later in the season, but those who waited until the rain had passed were able to pick the Grüner Veltliner fruit in beautiful condition. This fruit was hand-picked into small boxes, small cages, and transported as rapidly as possible to the winery. The fruit was very gently handled, wasn't pumped anywhere. They refer to it as being very gently pressed. I wonder if it was whole bunch pressed, but without extracting bitterness, but also wanting to avoid too many solids in the juice that might give off flavours during fermentation. The wine predominantly fermented in 300-litre Austrian oak barrels. These were second or third year use, so relatively seasoned, not giving much oak character whatsoever. A small portion of the wine also fermented in similarly sized acacia barrels, and acacia will give a more delicate flavour than oak. So they're not really looking for obvious oak notes in this wine. Following fermentation, the wine was racked into larger barrels. These were 2,500 litre, and again this was a mix of oak and acacia. During the racking process, they tried to leave somewhere between 5 and 10% of the lees in the wine, so that the wine could gain some richness from those as it aged. The wine stayed in barrel up until the following August, so probably about 8 or 9 months. So not a long period of age. Obviously at 2018, this has now spent probably about 5 years in bottle. So I'm looking for this to be a nicely mature wine at this stage. Looking at the colour, I'm actually slightly concerned that maybe the wine might have oxidised in the bottle. It's a relatively deep yellow colour there. Now this wine has, according to its label, 14.5% alcohol, and yet it doesn't particularly seem to yet to be forming heavy tears in the glass. It's not coming across as quite as viscous and syrupy as I might be expecting for a wine with that alcohol level. So let's see what we make of the aromas, shall we? Those are really quite intense. They're rich, they have an oily nature, there are toasty notes in there, and not surprisingly for a wine that's had this kind of bottle age, there's plenty of complexity. There are hints of high-toned notes of blossom, honeysuckle, that sort of thing. There are slight toasty notes. There are creamy notes coming from lees aging. There are mineral hints and there's a rounded bottle development character. So plenty going on in here. It's sort of lovely and rich. So let's have a taste, shall we? On the palate, that's a big, rich wine. There are those toasty notes. There's an oily texture. This is medium to full-bodied, and actually coming behind that oily texture, there's a little bit of warmth there. But before you get to the alcohol warmth, there's a real sort of creaminess comes in on the mid-palate. Behind that, there are the mineral notes of the acidity. And as you taste the wine, it seems to be going through different phases. They're beautifully harmonious, but it's revealing these different characteristics as the wine opens up. There's almost like a sort of a slightly developed pear note. There is fair structure. As I said, the wine isn't huge in the mouth. It's sort of medium to full-bodied rather than full-bodied. The acidity is giving it reasonable length. The alcohol may be cutting it off slightly, but actually there are some lovely enduring flavours, such as the concentration of the fruit on the back palate. I'm finding more aspects here. There's almost a hazelnut note in here, these creamy notes, and all lifted by these touches of mineral acidity. The wine isn't particularly sharp, but it does have a good underlying acidity. All in all, an impressive wine. It's showing some development. It seems to show room for plenty more development. There's a richness of fruit. The toasty notes, I'm sure, could expand. And I think the freshness and the alcohol will keep the wine stable for several years. So I think if you were to come back to this in 4 or 5 years, you'd still find it was developing. It's a lovely example of the richness and complexity that Grüner Veltliner can develop with time in bottle. Looking at the Wine Searcher aggregated score for this wine, it scored 94 out of 100. And certainly I'd agree that its richness, its complexity, its harmony, and its ability to develop further fully justifies that score. It's not a cheap wine. Given its quality, you'll find that very typically Grüner Veltliner can offer far more value for money than top wines from Burgundy or something like that, with the same time in bottle. So yes, a wine well worth considering. Thank you so much for watching the tasting. I do hope you've enjoyed it. If you have, do please press the like button. We'd really appreciate that. If you have any comments you'd like to leave, please pop those in the comments box below. If you'd like to watch more of these videos, the best answer would be to subscribe to our channel, and that way you can set yourself a notification so that you're alerted every time we publish a new video. If you have friends you think might like to watch, do please feel free to forward it to them. We'd really appreciate you doing that. I'll leave a link in the notes below to the Wine Searcher webpage for this vintage of this wine, so that you can find out what its availability is in your market, what its pricing is, and you can use the tabs on that page to find out more about the wine making, about the wine's price history, any critics notes we've got, any awards it's won, and hopefully all the background you will need. So thank you once again for joining us, and I do hope you'll manage to make some time and come and join us again for another tasting in the near future. Bye for now.